Viewer discretion is advised.
In a land far, far away. Well, actually not that far if you happen to live there, but in any case, in a land which is now known as Macedonia, a child was born in 356 BC. His parents wanted to call him Steve, but then they realized that he wasn't going to grow up in Western Europe but in ancient Greece, and so they called him Alexander. He later became known as Alexander the Great. The legend has it that the night before Alexander was conceived, his mother, Olympia, dreamt up that she was struck by a thunderbolt. Even more so, when she was given birth at the royal palace, an eagle flew over their house, and thus the people, who were very gullible at that time, believed that one of the gods, and we're not going to say which one, we're not going to point fingers, they believed that he was Alexander's father.
Wow.
Which must have really pissed off his actual father, Philip II. We may never know the truth, but in any case, as time went by, Alexander grew up to be a very energetic and curious boy. He was taught how to read, write, fight, and hunt. The young prince was most fascinated by the stories about Achilles, the legendary warrior from Greek mythology. The stories inspired young Alexander to look forward to his own conquests and battles. That is why every time his father would return victorious, although celebrating with the rest, Alexander would then turn super grim. When asked by his crew what the problem was, he would reply,
"My father is going to conquer the whole of the world, and there will be nothing great left for me and you to do."
Hashtag royalty problems. But Philip was worried about other things. He thought that his son was not getting the right education. At the time, Macedonia was only beginning its rise in ancient Greece, and many, including the proud government of the cultural center of Greece, Athens, viewed Macedonians as barbarians. In order to ensure that his boy was never picked on or called stupid, Philip invited his old friend, a philosopher by the name of Aristotle, to teach the kid. Alexander learned from Aristotle about planets, world geography, and history, which was not actually such a big topic considering that they lived in ancient Greece. But Alexander was fascinated by the lessons, and later said,
"Philip gave me life, and Aristotle taught me how to live honorably."
Warning, there will be a lot of cliches like this one. Alexander was way too theatrical for his age, and with time it only got worse, so be prepared for more epic quotes like this one. However, Alexander was still very smart and brave. The story has it that one day a dodgy trader brought Philip a big, beautiful horse, and the trader asked for 13 talents in return. No, not those talents, the coins used at that time. And 13 talents was a lot of money. Also, the horse was freaking out so much that no one could mount it.
How's your leg, huh? How's your leg? You ready to race? Huh?
Philip got mad and told the trader to fuck off. But Alexander, who was just 10 at the time, noticed that the horse was terrified of its shadow, and so he turned it the other way around. The kid mounted the horse and rode into the sunset. After about an hour they returned and never spoke of what happened on the trip again, but the horse was super chill. And then Philip told Alexander,
"My boy, you must find a kingdom big enough for your ambitions. Macedonia is too small for you."
The horse would stay with Alexander throughout many of his future conquests. Alexander called the stallion Bucephalos, which means ox head. The first test for Alexander and his horse came in 339 BC. The Thracian tribes rebelled against Philip, who has conquered them earlier, and so Alexander was part of the army that went on to thrash the Thracians. But in 338 BC, there was more trouble. The Athenians did not like the fact that Macedonia was conquering everyone, and so they decided to break off the alliance and attack the kingdom. Alexander commanded the cavalry in the Great Battle of Chaeronea. Alexander was the first to break the enemy lines, and then the great victory followed for Philip's army. Philip and his son marched towards the other Greek cities, where they were welcomed because, well, their cities had literally no protection at that point. The Spartans were the only ones who refused to let Philip in, but the king decided to leave him alone because, you know, they were the Spartans and there was literally nothing Philip could take from them.
This is Sparta!
Okay.
So it's all going good, and then bam, Alexander and his dad have an argument. As it happens, Philip grew tired of Olympia and decided to marry again. But even more so, his new wife called Cleopatra. No, that's the wrong Cleopatra. Yep, that's the one. It turned out that she could give the king new heir to the throne at any point in time, which Alexander was obviously not very happy about. So, Alexander and his mother were exiled and fled to her brother's land. Olympia's brother was Alexander I of Epirus, and he was not too happy about their arrival because he was afraid of Philip, but he could not refuse his sister. And then Philip tried to make up with Alexander, but not with his ex, and was like, I still love you. And Alexander was like, what about mom? And Philip was like, don't mention that bitch. And Alexander was like, I hate you. And Philip was like, you're grounded and all your friends are exiled from Macedonia. And so the negotiations failed. Finally, Philip tried to make amends with his family by offering his daughter, from another wife, to Alexander of Epirus. But, during the marriage ceremony, it all went wrong. Philip was brutally murdered by the captain of his bodyguards, Pausanias. The assassin was killed by the bodyguards who chased him down, and to this day, no one knows why exactly he killed Philip. On that sad day, Alexander was proclaimed the king. The first thing that the new king did was get rid of all the competition. His cousin Amyntas IV was executed, alongside with 2 Macedonian princes, his other relatives called the Lyncesters, and also Cleopatra's uncle, who apparently had it coming because he was a dick to Alexander before, which was pretty fucking stupid on his part. But Alexander's mother also went into a full-on crazy mode.
The last to go will see the first 3 go before her.
She burned alive Cleopatra's newborn daughter and made Cleopatra herself commit suicide. Alexander was pissed, but essentially there was no one to challenge his claim, and so it all turned out to be okay. And so, the reign of Alexander the Great has begun. The year was 336 BC. Many members of the Greek Corinthian League thought Alexander to be just an amateur who would be unable to hold the power for too long. But boy, would he prove them wrong. Alexander and his loyal army quickly suppressed the uprisings in the region of Thessaly, and through his victories and shrewd diplomacy,
one word, and I hit you again.
He convinced the League members to stand by him. During his little tour through Greece, Alexander met another philosopher called Diogenes the Cynic in the city of Corinth. Diogenes spent his life living in a barrel and refused all the riches that the life had to offer him. Alexander was so impressed by the philosopher that he asked what he could do for him. Diogenes said that it would be great if Alexander just moved and didn't block the sunlight. Alexander was even more impressed. He even said later on,
If I were not Alexander, I would like to be Diogenes.
But Alexander was destined to do greater things. The problem was that Athens was still a pain in the king's arse. They continuously refused to join the league, and in the next year, a Greek city by the name of Thebes also forced the Macedonian garrison out of its walls and declared independence from Macedonia. Alexander was not impressed. His army arrived to the city so quickly that Thebes stood no chance. And Alexander made sure that he made an example out of the city. The city itself was leveled to the ground and its citizens were murdered. But it worked, and all Greeks, including Athens, pledged allegiance to Alexander. This meant that the Macedonian king could now start his long-anticipated campaign into neighboring Persia. The army and its young commander crossed the Hellespont, and thus the invasion has begun. On the next episode of Alexander the Great, why did Alexander kill his black friend? Did Alexander have a boyfriend? And finally, why does no one ever mention Alexander's dog? All of this in the second part of the video. Oh yeah, and you should definitely share and subscribe. Goodbye.